They called it the Savage Mountain for a reason. 1 in every 4 who dared to climb it never came back. But what if I told you that among those frozen bodies and missing souls are 5 women, each one defying fear, each one swallowed whole by K2's silence? July 1986. Julie Tullis, a British filmmaker with a dream bigger than the clouds, was last seen gasping for breath near Camp Ep1. Her frostbitten hands clutched her camera like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Days later, rescuers found her body, eyes wide open, staring into the blinding snow as if she had seen something the mountain didn't want the world to know. The same summer, Lilianne and Maurice Bar from France vanished in a whiteout storm, her husband shouting her name into a void that swallowed every sound. Then Wanda Rutkiewicz, the Polish legend, walked alone into a blizzard and never walked back. Allison Hargreaves, torn from the ridge by hurricane winds so fierce they ripped her soul from the rock. And Chantal Mauduit, found still, beneath the snow, her tent crushed in the night. 5 women. 5 stories the mountain tried to erase. But tonight, we're bringing them back. Their courage, their pain, their final moments. You're watching K2 Stories, where we climb through history's coldest tragedies to uncover the truth that the mountain buried. Hit subscribe, because what you're about to hear will change how you see human endurance forever. The story begins with Julie Tullis, a woman who wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't a world-class mountaineer or a hardened explorer. She was a filmmaker, a dreamer from England who fell in love with mountains through the lens of her camera. In 1986, Julie joined an ambitious British expedition led by Allison Hargreaves to climb K2, the Mountain of Mountains. Her mission was simple: film history. But what she didn't know was that she would become part of it. That summer, K2 was chaos. Over 60 climbers crowded the slopes, the biggest traffic jam in mountaineering history. The weather was unstable, oxygen tanks were scarce, and everyone was racing against time. Julie, already exhausted from weeks at high altitude, pushed on. She refused to turn back even when frostbite began to creep into her fingers. She told Alan, "If I die on this mountain, let it be with the camera rolling." They reached Camp 4 at 8,000 meters, the death zone. The wind screamed like jet engines. The air was so thin it felt like breathing through a straw. Julie set up her camera anyway. She wanted to capture the raw face of survival, but survival doesn't always want to be filmed. Then came the storm, one of the worst in K2's history. For days, climbers were trapped in their tents, buried in snow. Oxygen ran out. Food froze. People stopped talking, just stared into the fabric walls, waiting for the wind to stop. When it finally cleared, Julie was gone. Not lost, not missing, just gone. She had collapsed in the night, quietly, without a sound. Her camera was found beside her. The final reel showed nothing but white, just snow swirling endlessly in the wind. It was as if the mountain had filmed its own silence. Allison Hargreaves would die days later. Others descended half alive, frostbitten and broken. But Julie stayed. Her body still lies near Camp 4, preserved by the cold, her story frozen in time. She became the first British woman to die on K2, and the mountain was just getting started. Just weeks after Julie's death, Lilianne and Maurice and her husband Maurice were making their own push for the summit. They were France's beloved climbing couple, called Les Époux de l'Impossible, the couple of the impossible. Every mountain they touched seemed to bow to their love and determination. But K2 bows to no one. By late July 1986, the Barards were among the exhausted climbers still trapped high above. The storm that had killed Julie hadn't spared anyone. Yet when the skies briefly cleared, Maurice insisted they go for the top. Lilianne hesitated. She was exhausted, her body weak from lack of oxygen. But she followed him. Always had. Always would. They reached the summit together, one of the few couples in history to stand hand in hand on K2's peak. Maurice raised the French flag. Lilianne whispered through her frozen lips, "We did it, love." It was a moment of triumph, one that would last only minutes. The descent was pure hell. Clouds swallowed the ridge. The wind returned, roaring like a living thing. Visibility dropped to zero. The path down blurred into nothing. In that chaos, Maurice turned around, and Lilianne was gone. He called her name until his throat bled. "Lilianne! Lilianne!" But only the storm answered back, its voice a mocking echo. He searched for hours, stumbling through white oblivion until he too collapsed, half dead, barely clinging to the slope. When he finally staggered into Camp 4, his face was covered in ice, his eyes hollow. He whispered, "She was right behind me." Days later, when rescuers found her, Lilianne lay peacefully in the snow. Not mangled, not broken, just still. Her face, they said, looked calm, almost as if she had simply lain down to rest. Maurice would never recover from that day. He returned to France, but part of him never came down from K2. Lilianne became the second woman to die on the mountain that summer, another bright flame extinguished by the thin air. And somewhere in the silence above Camp 4, the snow still hides the last footprints she made before disappearing forever. But K2 wasn't done claiming its women. Far from it. 6 years passed. The mountain slept, but not peacefully. Then came Wanda Rutkiewicz, the Polish legend, the first woman ever to summit K2. But this time, she wasn't climbing for glory. She was chasing ghosts. It was 1992, and Wanda had already conquered 8 of the world's 14 8,000-meter peaks. She was fierce, disciplined, and brutally honest about the cost of her ambition. Her body was worn, her fingers scarred by frostbite, but her spirit, unbreakable. She once said, "To be a woman in the mountains is to be doubted twice and respected once." She wanted that respect, and she would give everything to earn it. When she arrived at K2 base camp that May, she told the others she planned to climb solo. No teammates, no backup, no margin for error. She wanted to prove to herself and to the world that she could face the savage mountain alone. But as she packed her gear, she wasn't the same fiery woman who once laughed in the face of danger. Friends said she looked thinner, quieter, as if the mountain had already whispered her fate. The weather was unstable. Forecasts warned of a coming storm, one that could devour the entire upper face. Other climbers begged her to wait. But Wanda smiled and said, "I must go. This may be my last chance." She began her ascent on May 12th. The last person to see her alive was a Mexican climber, Carlos Carsolio, who found her resting near 8,300 meters. He asked, "Are you coming down?" She shook her head. "No, I will spend the night here. Tomorrow, I'll go for the summit." Carlos looked into her eyes, calm, unwavering, but distant, as if she was already somewhere else. He pleaded with her to descend, but Wanda just smiled. That was the last time anyone ever saw her. When the storm came, it came fast. Winds tore through the ridge like a blade. Snow swallowed every trace of her route. Radios went silent. When the weather cleared days later, there was nothing left. No tent, no rope, no Wanda. Just the endless white, and the mountain's cruel silence. Her body was never found. Some believe she lies entombed in the ice. Others say the wind carried her spirit higher, above the summit she sought but never reached. But those who knew her say Wanda didn't die on K2. She became part of it. And that's the thing about this mountain. It doesn't take your life all at once. It takes it piece by piece. By 1995, the mountain had already taken enough, but K2 doesn't keep count. That summer, Allison Hargreaves arrived at its base. She was a British mother of 2, barely 33 years old, and already a legend. She had just conquered Everest solo. No Sherpas, no oxygen, no assistance. The world called her reckless. She called herself free. Reporters asked her why she'd risk her life again, leaving 2 children behind. Allison just smiled and said, "Because it's who I am. I climb to live." She climbed light, fast, almost elegantly, like she was dancing with the mountain. On August 13th, she stood on K2's summit, alone in the thin air, a Union Jack tied to her ice axe. She radioed down in triumph. Then, she began her descent, and that's when the wind began to scream. What hit the mountain that afternoon was no ordinary storm. It was a cyclone. Winds at over 200 kilometers per hour battered the ridges, Other climbers who survived said they saw tents rip apart like paper, bodies thrown into the abyss. No one ever saw Allison again. Some said she was blown straight off the mountain. Others believe she was struck by flying debris, her body carried away into the clouds. Her gear, her remains, never found. But her name carved itself into K2's icy record as one of the bravest souls ever to challenge it. 3 years later, in 1998, another woman returned to those same slopes, Chantal Mauduit, a French climber known for her grace and laughter. She was called La femme qui danse avec les montagnes, the woman who dances with mountains, but even she couldn't dance with K2 forever. Chantal was camping high with her Sherpa partner, Ang Chering. That night, the air was eerily still. Then, just before dawn, the snow broke loose. A sudden avalanche, silent but deadly. It crushed their tent in seconds. When rescue teams reached them the next morning, they found Chantal's body still inside her sleeping bag, as if she'd never woken. Her face was calm, peaceful, as though she'd simply drifted back into the mountain she loved. 5 women, Julie, Lilianne, Wanda, Allison, Chantal, different countries, different dreams, one unforgiving mountain. Each of them believed they could make peace with K2. But on that mountain, peace is just another illusion. And yet, their stories refuse to disappear beneath the snow. Decades have passed. The climbers have changed, the gear has evolved, the world has moved on. But high above the clouds, where the wind never stops screaming, K2 still keeps their secrets. If you climb the Abruzzi Ridge today, you might pass the frozen remains of Julie Tullis, still resting near Camp Rohr, her camera rusted, her story preserved in ice. A few hundred meters below, the snow occasionally shifts to reveal the place where Lilianne Berard fell, her final resting spot now marked only by wind-blown stones. Somewhere beyond reach, Wanda Rutkiewicz is still missing. No grave, no cross, just an eternal silence that feels almost deliberate. And every time the wind howls through the bottleneck, climbers swear they can hear Allison Hargreaves' voice, a whisper reminding them how fragile courage can be. As for Chantal Mauduit, her friends say the mountain looks different at dawn, softer, almost kind, just for a moment, like it remembers her laughter. 5 women, 5 echoes, each of them pushed beyond fear, beyond reason, and into legend. They weren't reckless, they were relentless. They didn't die chasing glory, they died living their truth. Maybe that's the real curse of K2. It doesn't just kill, it immortalizes. It takes your body, but leaves your story hanging in the wind for the next climber to hear and wonder, will the mountain remember me too? And it always does, because the savage mountain never forgets. It just waits. If you've made it this far, thank you for climbing with us through their stories, through the triumph, the terror, and the silence. There are more souls waiting to be remembered, so hit subscribe and join us again as we uncover the untold tragedies and miracles that still lie frozen on the world's deadliest peaks. You're watching K2 Stories, where legends never die, they just sleep in the snow.